in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hi and welcome to Exploring Hobbies. I'm Jamie Fouché, and today we are going to learn a little bit about metalworking. So I have with me here today Steve Huck and Rick Kaunick. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so explain a little bit about what metalworking is. I was picturing it before and couldn't, somewhere between metal shop at in high school or junior high and like making artistic kind of stuff and anywhere in between, and I really had no idea. So help us kind of define that.
You're really close.
Okay.
Metalworking goes back to way before the Egyptian time, where people would find any type of shiny metal, could pound it, hammer it, melt it down, turn it into a different object. And through time, it's evolved into tools, farming tools, weapons, and it's gone on and on since then. So what our hobby is that we like to actually make small model type things. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to show you today are some of the things that we've produced and how we've done them.
Okay, great. How did you get started?
Well, personally, someday I just went and bought a lathe and bought a mill and decided I was going to do metalwork. I had no idea what I was going to make, and I decided to build a quarter scale running engine of a 1937 Bugatti.
Okay.
It will never be done because the engineering is extremely poor. It was just a total disaster, but what I learned trying to make that, I was able to transform into this. So it was, I just jumped into it with both feet and decided I wanted to do it. Yeah.
I think as kids, especially boys, we were shown how to do things, how to make things. Our dads always fixed things, repaired cars. My father had a Popular Mechanics magazines, and every one of them had some little project, some way to do things, even home-built airplanes. And as a kid, I would just go page by page over and over and over in these magazines. And then, of course, as I got older, my dad's garage became my playhouse. We could go in there and make things, do things, and it's just one of those things that you want to make things. And over the years of mini bikes, go-karts, having to repair them, fix them, make them better, you just learn a lot of things along the way. In my particular case, I've been a machinist for over 30 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people find it odd that my day job is also my hobby night job. And we belong to the Metro Detroit Metalworking Club. And the beauty with that is we have many people in the club. We have people that are still working like myself. We have a lot of retired people. And everybody likes to share their information and their hobbies, just like we're doing today.
That's great. I actually think it's great that your day job and your hobby go well together. Yep. I mean, that just means you like what you're doing. That can't be too bad of a thing, right?
Yep.
What kind of tools and skills do you need to get started in metalworking?
Well, that is a real big can of worms. Okay. And the reason for metalworking can be something as simple as just making a piece of jewelry, casting silver into a piece of jewelry, making something you need to repair around your house, up to machinery to produce stuff like this. And of course, the internet's an incredible resource for looking at different projects and the things that you can build and do. One of the shows that's coming up at the end of April, which we'll talk about a little later, is just hundreds and hundreds of model engines and people that do this type of work. So you just go online, you look around. If you're into trains, people do a lot with make their own stuff for the trains. So the machinery end of it, it could be anything as simple as a file and a hacksaw. On the high end, both Steve and myself, we have CNC machinery. It's computer controlled, and of course, our wives don't like us to spend too much money, but we do have some nice toys to play with that way.
Do you do them programming for those CNC machines?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all the design, all the programming for the machine is all done right in front of the computer while we're watching TV at night.
All right. So it sounds like what you're saying is depending on the kind of metalworking, the tools are going to vary a good deal.
Yes.
Huge,
right?
huge.
Yes.
And so for the machinery, is that something where you normally would invest, you have to invest in it, or are there options for people if they want to go somewhere and maybe lease or use something to kind of get some experience with it before they invest their own money?
Absolutely. You can go tech shop, where you can pay a monthly fee, and then you can pay money to be trained on a machine, and you can go there for $100 a month and use that machine all you want. They have a full machine shop, a full wood shop, and you can go there and get a feel for it. If you like it, then you can start buying that stuff, putting it in your home, and keep going from there.
And actually, that's something relatively new. Years ago, basically, it was either a friend had equipment or your neighbor down the street. It seemed like every neighborhood had some old guy that had a lathe in his garage that would teach us how to use it. And like Steve said, you've got Tech Shop, you've got another one called i3 Detroit. That's considered a hacker group, but they have machinery, CNCs, lasers to cut this stuff. Stuff that was high tech in shops years ago is now at the hands of the hobbyist. So, and like I was saying, at the low end of the scale, this is just a piece of brass, and what this is going to be turned into is, I've just roughed it out. It will have to be what's called metal finished. I'll be radiusing it, polishing it. This is a belt buckle for a Civil War reenactor, a friend of mine. So he periodically, new members join, and I make them new belt buckles. So it's just a nice little hobby thing. It doesn't take me very long, but it's something that. And the real neat thing with any hobby is that when you take out something you've done, people will admire it.
Yeah.
Where did you get that? I made it. You don't buy it. You didn't go to a store and purchase it. I made it. And so there's generally only one of that exact thing in the universe.
And so just to help us understand what's involved, give me an idea of the process that you have to go through to make something like that.
On this,
Yeah.
we have a small template, which is just a plastic cutout of this part off of an original belt buckle. We cut that out, and then we put what's called layout dye. It's a blue liquid that dries like a real thin layer of paint, and then we would scribe that in with a sharp instrument, little scriber it's called. And then from that point on, you could do this with either a jeweler's saw, or you can do it on a drill press and just hand cut it out. At that point, I'll radius these corners and using a small file, polish it on a polishing wheel. There's a slight amount of bend that gets put into it. We'll do that on a press, and it'll be done, ready to go.
And so did you, can you buy like shapes like that, like squares or circles or whatever, or do you generally have to buy sheets of material that you have to cut to fit whatever project you're working on?
Absolutely. There's ASAP Metals, which is a local supplier, and they will sell you any size, any shape you need in whatever. I could buy this in that exact size if I wanted to. Generally, something like our motor here, we would buy this, but we would buy one big bar because we're going to be needing to make 5 of these. So whatever we figure out what we need, and of course a little bit to hold it in the machine maybe, and we just purchase it that way.
Great.
I typically buy what I need and then double it. So I'll have a piece on the shelf
Just in case.
Yep.
for later.
And
then if you
occasionally we may make a mistake and have to start over
Be a
again.
little spare.
Imagine that
or-
happens now and
exactly.
then.
It does.
And you don't have to spend a lot of money.
Okay.
Take, for instance, if you want to cast aluminum. For just a couple of $100s, we had, I think, 12 guys come over, and we built furnaces to melt aluminum out of 5-gallon buckets.
Wow.
For I think it was about $200 a furnace. And we built all the tools, made the furnace, and actually was able to melt and pour aluminum into a mold for only about $250. We were ready to set up and ready to go. So you don't have to spend a huge amount of money to get into metalworking. There are parts of it that is pretty cheap.
And a lot of the things that we've done, like you said, the metal casting, we'll run into people that said, oh, I bought a furnace and I bought the book and I got these chemicals, but I was so overwhelmed, I never did it. And then you show up with a 5-gallon bucket furnace and you pour all these wonderful things. And that's why we do it. We go to educate people. We go to show them that, yes, you can do that.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the clubs. Is that one of the ways that people can, kind of learn more? Talk a little bit more about the clubs.
Yeah, the club's a lot more than that. The club is basically a network where if I need a tool that I don't have, we'll post on a little group site on Yahoo. Does anybody have this, or can I borrow that? And usually within an hour, somebody's at your house helping you, or is got that tool you can go borrow and pick up. It's you need help to figure out a way to do something. It's a great resource.
Yeah.
It just goes beyond, you know. And then we meet once a month, and everybody talks about what they're doing and how they're going to do it, and if you have a better way, you could show somebody. But it's a way to get help, and it's also a way to everybody to help each other also,
Yep.
so that you can get your stuff done and not have to have everything.
And be able to borrow and kind of use that
Yeah.
use that network to help
Help
each other
each other
with it.
out. Do you have a piece of stock that I can? Yeah, here, use this one.
So is the club that you guys are with? I'm sorry, can I have that name again?
The club that we belong to, Steve and myself, is the Metro Detroit Metalworking Club. We meet at Macomb College in Macomb County, and we meet once a month, second Wednesday of the month, approximately 7 o'clock. Some people get there a little earlier, some people get there later. And it's just a group of a lot of guys. It's been around for quite a few years. We have generally between 50 to 70 people membership during the year. But the greatest resource of that club is that people will come in with a problem or just bring things to give away for free. It's just a real good resource for helping people.
That's great. And is the club just general metalworking, and people have, kind of work in different types? Or are there clubs that kind of specialize in, like, if you're more into, doing it for art or jewelry making or something, are there other clubs that really are geared more towards people who are doing something that's more specialized?
Metalworking, I would say jewelry, yes, but we have people who work on classic bikes, motorcycles. We have a dentist that built an airplane and flies it at our picnic every year. Blacksmiths, people who build engines. It's anybody that does anything with metal is welcome to come.
So it's broad.
It's
Very,
everywhere,
very broad.
everywhere.
We have a guy who's actually building his own sports car now. We have people that make guns. And a lot of the times, even though it's a metalworking club, it would segue into, we have woodworkers, we have blacksmiths. A lot of people belong to different organizations, Civil War reenactors, It's a very, very diverse group of people, but usually what happens is once you do one thing, you want to do more.
It leads into other
It
things.
leads into
Always,
another thing,
always.
always. So.
Great. Has metalworking changed a lot over the years, or do you find that it's kind of the same, the same things that people got interested in making and creating to, either for entertainment or to help their lives be easier, pretty much the same now as they were, 20, 30 years ago or more?
Steve and myself actually went over some of these questions earlier, and we have different views of some of the things, but on that one, we pretty much both agreed that metalworking really has not changed. Making things that are in Popular Mechanics magazine from the 1960s is still practical and applicable today. The same exact processes are still done. We still cast metal, we still machine it, we hammer it into whatever, jewelry. Very little has actually really changed. Oddly enough, one more thing before I lose my thought here. On the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., it's capped with an aluminum cap. It's about 8 inches, four-sided cap on there. And when that aluminum was made, it was actually worth more than gold and platinum back then because electricity hadn't been developed yet. And electricity is what's really needed to produce aluminum. Now what we buy for pennies, that would have been worth just hundreds of thousands of dollars back then. Mm-hmm. But the process of metalworking, pretty much all the same.
Same stuff.
Yeah, other than the fact that you have a computer driving motors that is doing what your hands used to do, the basics have not changed at all.
All right.
Yeah.
So that stack of Popular Mechanics magazine that my husband says he can't get rid of, I really should
He's
believe
not lying
him.
to
Yes.
you.
There's good stuff in there.
There's absolutely.
All right, I'll let him keep it.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys brought with you some stuff. Why don't you share with us? And I'm assuming you've made most of this, so why don't you share with the audience?
Okay,
what
I'm
this
going
is
to
all
talk about some of the club stuff that we have,
Okay,
and
yeah.
Steve will talk about his stuff.
Perfect.
And when we discussed doing this show, the thing was, I knew he would bring some really fantastic finished products. And I want to go a little bit backwards on that. What I brought was, I brought some of the things that we do to get to these points, and these are aluminum castings.
Great.
And these castings were actually at one time styrofoam. It's a process called lost foam casting.
Okay.
You can only make one product, because what happens is we would make this product, and you can see that it's got, you can actually still see the little white styrofoam spots on this, and it would be cast in this position. But we would take this, we would, in this particular, this is a small tiger face emblem that we were making, and here's what it looked like before we started. It was just a piece of regular house insulation. We CNC machined the styrofoam face on there, cut it out, hot glue it onto an end of a piece of white foam, stick it, put a coating on it that basically keeps the sand separated from the aluminum, and this goes into dry sand. And we have a little sleeve, we pour the molten metal in, fire comes out and fills up that cavity. And the neat thing with this process is that you can make shapes that you would never be able to make in any other way. These are just what we call yard arts. You know, you just take a piece of foam, hack it up into a bunch of interesting shapes, glue it together, stick it in the sand, and cast them.
Yeah.
But to do this in a normal, what's called a cope and drag system, which is the way it's been done for eons, this would be almost impossible to do because of all the directions that it's going. So over the last couple of years, we have cast all sorts of things, and one of the things that we have on the table, I don't know if they'll be able to see it, pick that up. That was a supercharger housing for Steve's new motor, which he'll talk about, which you can also see down there. This was actually put into the sand and removed and then cast. But a lot of the things that we do, we need to come up with a shape. And a lot of times you can start with a big chunk and whittle it down and cut it and machine it to what you need. But sometimes, such as this tiger's face, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So if you can make it in foam, you can cast it in aluminum.
Great. What else?
What else? How about this engine here was designed as a steam engine. It's actually an aircraft style engine.
Okay.
But we designed it was designed by a fella in Flushing as a steam engine. We did it as a club project. And by that I mean the parts are made by 11 or 12 different members. Everybody picked the piece they wanted to make, or the 4 or 5 pieces they wanted to make. Went home, made their parts to a very high tolerance or a very exact size. And then on a Saturday afternoon, everybody brought their parts over to the garage. We sat down, put it all together,
Assembled.
and put it all together, and and turned
and
it
it
into
works.
a working
I
And
see
darned
hosing and
if
stuff,
it didn't work.
And it works. Yep. So that was
That's
done as a
exciting.
club project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it actually spins while it's running.
yeah.
And do you do that kind of project often, where it's something where maybe you specialize or are interested in one piece and someone else wants another, and so by kind of dividing it up, you
No,
end up with something?
I don't know how we came up with it. I just decided it would be kind of fun to try that. There's
Yeah.
a lot of them on the internet, and I know other clubs that have tried it, and I've never seen one finished. They always seem to just kind of
Get
go
to a-
away and never really get finished, so I wanted to see if we could actually get one finished. And then this was another variation on that, where I made one part of this engine. I made multiple copies. But this one was done over the internet. So I sent parts to other countries all over the world, and other people made their part in other parts of the world and sent their parts to me. And by the time all the part swapping was over, everybody had enough parts to build one engine.
But all you were responsible for was
Was
one
your
part.
piece.
Your
But I had to
piece.
make this part multiple times. I had to make 11 of these pieces.
Yeah.
And send them all over the world, and then everybody sent me their
Do
parts.
their part.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
that was kind of another
a global effort
group
there.
build,
That's
yeah.
neat.
And then this fella here, it's a actual running V8 engine. It's exactly like a 1969 or 1970 V8 Chevy would have been back then. Every single piece is in there. The only thing that differs is the size. It's exactly like a real engine. I could start it up right now. About a year, maybe 16 months to design, and another 16 months to build it. So it took me about 2.5 years from thinking about doing it to actually starting it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
that's amazing.
well over 500 pieces I had to make. I had to make my own spark plugs and everything. There's an enormous amount of work that goes on with something like that. So if you're going to get into metalworking and do this, you got to be very dedicated and very focused, or you'll just have a ton of projects that are never finished.
Have some patience, and it seems like there's a lot more there than just metalworking. I mean, in order to understand how the engine actually works and to make it function, I would imagine there's some like electrical understanding and some of that other skills that would come into play.
Very, very true. Yeah, I as a kid used to work on engines. I rebuilt the motor in my mom's car when I was 17 years old, so I know how an engine works. But that wasn't even close to half the battle. I had to learn how to cast rubber to make the spark plug boots. I had to learn how to machine plastic to make plastic parts, that ignition parts. It was, like I said,
and not all parts scale down well. Building something big generally is a lot easier than trying to make something smaller. All of underneath the valve covers, it has little bitty rocker arms that are incredibly complex little bitty parts. And being that on a bigger engine, they can be made bigger and stronger. Well, now you've scaled it down. You have to squeeze all that into a little compartment and still have the strength so it doesn't break. So it has regular 8 cylinders. It's got a crankshaft. It's got a camshaft. Steve had to cut the camshaft using a special fixture he designed. It's amazing. It really truly is.
Water. The radiator actually works.
Wow.
The water pump actually pumps water through the engine. It's absolutely exactly the way a real engine would be.
That's incredible.
And of course, being Steve, he didn't stop at just one. When he was doing this, he was manufacturing 2 at one time. And I said, "What are you doing?" You know, and he said, "Well, I'm setting up the next motor because it's going to have the supercharger on it, which will actually pump air into the motor just like a racing motor would do to increase the horsepower." So there'll be a matching set of these someday soon, with the other one being a supercharged motor.
Supercharged.
Got to have a supercharger.
Yes.
There you go. I know you brought some smaller parts with you. Are those parts you made?
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah. When I first got going in this, I did everything manually. And then Rick, I think it was probably about the 7th or 8th meeting, Rick brought his CNC machine to the meeting and demonstrated it. And I had to have one. The next day I was on eBay.
He lit up like a Christmas tree.
Trying to find parts. And over a course of about a year, I built my own CNC machine. Okay, now it's built. How do you use it? I had no idea how to use it. I didn't know how to write code. I didn't know how to do anything. So this was actually the very first project that I ever made with my CNC machine. I designed it as something to teach myself how to use that piece of equipment. So basically I just machined a shape 6 times, the exact same code 6 times, and you come up with something like that. But I made a few of them, but it was just something so you can teach yourself how to use the machine. And then eventually you go on to make parts for stuff like this. But
generally these are called Turner cubes. And what it is, it's a square and a square and a square and a square. But Steve went, of course, one farther and just did these little bitty connecting parts. And when I went over there and saw him running this, I couldn't even watch. I was so afraid it was going to break. It was near the end, and after he'd done side after side after side.
9 hours.
This is incredibly lightweight. There's very, very little material left here. But each one of those cubes is just held in a little corner section that he didn't machine out. If you did, they would just rattle and fall out.
Yeah.
So these are quite unique.
And I'm assuming that what lets you do that mathematical piece that makes it perfectly work is the coding, is the machinery that lets you get to that level of precision.
Yep. Once you know how to program that machine, you're basically unlimited. You can do just anything you want. Engraving, make parts, just anything. Now I got to have a CNC lathe so I can make even more ridiculous stuff that I don't need.
One of the neat things with our club motor was, though, that I would have to say, I think all of that was done manually. I don't believe any of that was done on a CNC. So, and of course, we all took our little parts, and one of the guys in the club is a woodworker, and he made the base. The original project called for this to be an aluminum base, and we felt that it just wasn't organic enough. It needed to have a little more character. So he sketched this up and made that. There's actually a plaque with everybody's name on it that Steve engraved, but it fell off somewhere. So we got to get that back on before next month's show.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing the pride in both of your voices as you talk about what you've made. No, that's really great, because I think a lot of people can relate to that, the satisfaction you get when you've made something, either by
absolutely.
yourself or in cooperation. Do you have a favorite project, either that was something that really challenged you, or maybe something that just you didn't think you'd finish that you did?
You feel this one.
I finished them all. But this motor right here is probably, it was the first motor I ever designed. I had no clue whether or not it was going to even work. And you work on something for a year and a half, not even knowing whether or not it's going to work when you get to the end. So when it finally started, yeah, I was pretty stoked.
And you can tell it. He's got some YouTube videos of when he first got some of the stuff going.
Yeah.
Oh,
and you can just tell how excited he
your
is in
hands
it.
are shaking.
Yeah.
It's just it's a thrill when the first time you hear them run. It's
And
really
of course,
a big
we
deal.
never have them completely finished when we're doing this. I mean, we have them clamped onto a workbench. The bases aren't built maybe, and
Yep.
my thing is I'm a process person. I teach jewelry classes, and one of the first things I tell people is I don't like jewelry. I don't wear jewelry. I don't have any jewelry except my wedding band, but I like process. I like how things are done. I like the aluminum casting. We did for years people wanted their own furnace. And I just really never had the time to help anybody. And then finally somebody said, well, why don't we do it as like a group build? And Steve, again, was kind enough to offer his garage, and we built 12 furnaces over the course of 2 weeks because there's certain processes that have to dry. And everybody got to learn together. And again, that's another one of those things where when you see it done, it's not nearly as overwhelming. And when somebody's there to help you along with it with problems, it's not nearly as overwhelming. I've done demonstrations where somebody emailed me and said they went home, they couldn't sleep because some of the things they wanted to do all their life, they now knew how they could do it. Yes.
They've got access to what
and
they
that's
need.
that's
Very
our
little
that's our
money.
payback. That's
Yeah.
where we thrive is helping people.
That's great.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great. You mentioned a show coming up.
That is, it's called the NAMES Show, which stands for the North American Model Engineering Society. It's the 25th anniversary. It's in Wyandotte, Michigan at the end of April. And this show is attended by people from all over the world. And how it started 25 years ago was a group of guys who built small models, not nearly as elaborate as this. There was a show in England 25 years ago, and they went to it. And they came home and they said, we have to do this. And it started out kind of a thing where it was in somebody's house. A bunch of guys got together, and then they said, we should do a little bigger at a place people can come see it. And here we are today, 25 years later, with this incredible show coming up at the end of the month. And I'm sure we'll be able to show you the flyer, at the end of the show here.
Okay. So what kind of things should people expect to see? Are there demonstrations? Are there examples of people's work? What should someone expect?
Well, Steve's actual engine, this particular motor, was the model of the year last year. Every year they pick one model to be
The featured model.
Featured model of the
It's the
year.
featured
Yes, the
model.
featured model. I always
Yeah.
get that screwed up.
And
but
then there's a whole hockey rink full of this.
hundreds and hundreds of motors. I'll be doing metal casting demonstrations. I'll be doing CNC talks on hobby, computer controlled machining. There's just there are everything you can imagine. There's a guy who built a 22 caliber Gatling gun. There, obviously we don't shoot this stuff, but it's everything you can imagine. There are huge trains that the engines are 6 feet long. These guys load them into these huge trailers and bring them to the shows every year, and it's all to share information. It's all to show people all this neat stuff.
And there's a lot of vendors there, if you're going to get into the hobby,
Yep.
where you can buy used tools, used equipment, and get a lot cheaper than having to go to the store and buying a new.
And new tools. There are some
So there's
vendors
a lot
that
of
supply.
stuff there.
Okay.
A lot of that support is there.
Yep.
The magazine subscriptions are out there. You can anything you need. And the best thing about it is, if you're trying to do this, this is the place to go to learn. It's school, because anybody behind those tables is more than willing to talk to you about it, teach you how they did it. If they don't know what they're talking about, they can show you somebody else who does know how to do that and get you help so that you can get to this point too. Build a model. Do you want to build a rifle this big that really shoots little tiny bullets? Do you want to build a train car, model boats, anything you want? They'll get you to the right people to show you how to do it.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Well, Steve and Rick, thank you so much for sharing your hobby with us. It's really amazing the things that you guys have been able to create. So besides the show, do you have any resources that maybe people could check out if they want to get more information getting started? Maybe the name of your club again, websites, that kind of thing.
Yep, they can get a hold of us at the MetroDetroitMetalworkers.com. My email address is on there. Ask any questions you want. There are forums for every kind of metalworking you can think of.
Okay.
If you want to get into casting, there's backyardmetalcasting.com. I can name probably 4 or 5 engine sites if that's where you want to go, but it's all out there. And all you got to do is a quick search and you'll find exactly what you need.
Google it.
Yep.
Google it.
Google it.
Google it.
Yep.
There are so many ways to go in metalworking. I could name websites for 15 minutes.
Okay. All right.
So-
Great, guys. We'll make sure that we include some of those links.
All righty.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
That's it for Exploring Hobbies. Look for future episodes.